Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and I am back today with another video on dimensional die cutting. Now I have done a video on this technique before. I will link that in the top right hand corner if you want to check it out, but I'm going to be using different dies today. I'm going to be using the Simon Says Stamp Celebration Times die set. I am not completely sure if this die set is still available. If it's not, there are plenty of balloon die sets. I'm sure you might already have one on hand anyway that you could use from your stash. So I have 3 different sizes of the regular balloons in the set. I'm not going to be using the heart balloon today, but it is adorable, but I wanted to keep this very symmetrical. So I'm using those 3 different sizes and I am placing them on a 4" by 5¼ white cardstock panel. Now the bottom one you can't see right now, but as I run it through you will. I have that hanging off the bottom just a little bit, just to give it a little bit more interest on this card because it is going to be very simple. Now I've got them lined up again, just the middle size balloon and the smaller size balloon. And those balloons that I have run through, so the larger one and now 2 of the smaller ones that I have cut out that are whole balloons, I'm actually going to put off to the side and put those back on my card at a later time. So I've got a 4¼ by 5½ so an A2 size white top folding card base here. And I am placing that panel that I had made right over the top of it where I want it to end up. I want some color behind those balloons and I want to do it with my distress inks. So I need to know where I want this panel to end up on my card. And in order to keep the sides around this panel clean, I'm going to go ahead and mask off with some painter's tape right where that panel ends. So I've got a nice white border all the way around my card that's going to stay nice and clean and white and free of any ink. These little strips of tape are also going to help me on those balloons that are kind of hanging off the edge on this right hand side and on the bottom there. That's going to keep my edges nice and clean and it's going to help my balloon stop where my panel stops, the color on my balloon stop. And you'll see more what I mean when I actually start doing the distress ink blending. So I am lining this up with that panel on all 4 sides, making sure that it goes right up to the edges all the way around. Then I'm going to take my pencil and mark the 4 edges, kind of 4 edges of the balloon. I know balloons don't have edges, but I need to know where these balloons are on my card. So whenever I go to color them in different colors, I'm not just throwing random spots of color here and there. So now that I've got this all mapped out, I've used 3 different sizes of circle dies that I just cut from some scrap cardstock, excuse me. And these dies I matched up with the balloons so they're just a tidbit larger than the actual balloon dies themselves. I'm using 3 different colors of distress ink here. I'm starting off with some Twisted Citron, and I have outlined those balloons beforehand with my pencil. Then I lined up that coordinating circle die that I have cut and made kind of a stencil out of. I line that up with all 4 of my pencil marks. Make sure you erase your pencil marks before you start doing your ink blending. I didn't on this one, and the bottom you can still see there's a little bit of pencil mark, but that's okay. My panel will end up covering that up. It's not a big deal. But once I have those all erased, I'm going to come in with my stencil and my Twisted Citron ink, and I am just going to color in this circle. Now I am starting off with a heavy hand at the bottom and going lighter as I go up, and this isn't going to be one solid color here. I want it to be a little bit of a gradient. Now once I had that done, I'm going to move on to my next balloon here, and I will line up the next size circle that I need. So this is a medium size balloon. I need the medium size circle. And I'm going to go ahead and erase my pencil marks before I start blending on this one. I remembered this time, so I won't have any pencil marks on this one. Line that up, and now I'm going to go in with some peacock feathers. Or no, this is actually Mermaid Lagoon, excuse me. So again, I've got my medium circle here, and I'm using a heavy hand towards the bottom and going lighter as I go up this circle for the more gradient look. And this is where that painter's tape really comes into play. It's going to keep that right edge nice and clean for me, and it's going to allow the color to stop where the balloon stops on that panel. Now I'm going to move on to my next color, and that is Spice Marmalade, which is an orange color. And I'm using the smallest circle that I die cut here because I am coloring in the smallest balloon. I used my eraser to go ahead and get rid of those pencil marks before I started coloring, and then I'll just blend from the bottom going up with that ink to color in this balloon. Now whenever you're working with these balloons more closely together, just make sure you're not overlapping any of them. That would be a really cool effect if you were going for that look of overlap balloons, and distress inks are really something great to use when you're coloring in your balloons like that, but that wasn't the look I was going for today, so I made sure to go ahead and keep everything nice and clean and the colors uncontaminated from one another. So I'm going back in with some of that Mermaid Lagoon for this next smallest balloon, and I erased my pencil lines, and I went ahead and flipped over my stencil here because I didn't want to get any of that orange ink or take the risk of blending any of that into the blue. So I just flipped my stencil over, and I'll again go from the bottom, build up the color, and then fade it out towards the top. Now I have my final balloon, and again this one is at the bottom. This is the mid-size balloon, so I'll go ahead and line it up, and I really don't need to worry about how far it goes over to the left hand or right hand side because I have, or the bottom side, excuse me, because I have masked off that panel all the way around. It's going to keep my edges clean, so I don't have to worry about the color getting anywhere where I don't want it to. So I'm going in with some Twisted Citron on this one, and this one I'm going to come again from the bottom straight towards the top. It's a little tricky on this one because it made me a little nervous. I was thinking, oh, I'm going to get color where I don't want it, but I've taken my precautions. I masked everything off, so it turned out beautifully. So once I had that completely done, I went ahead and overlaid my panel just to get a nice look, make sure I was happy with it, and I was. So what I decided to do to get the positioning perfect, while I still had the tape in place, I applied a bunch of fun foam and double-sided adhesive to the back of that panel, and I popped it up right over the top of that with the tape still on so I could line it up like I had been lining it up while I was doing all of my coloring with distress inks. Then very carefully I'm going to go ahead and peel off that painter's tape, and I've got that perfectly positioned panel. That was a mouthful, 3 P's in a row, but I had that panel perfectly positioned, oh my goodness, and the edges were nice and clean and white. Now this is where that dimensional die cutting comes into play. So I had that first layer of balloons. The color was on the very bottom layer. Then I had my next layer of dimension, which was my plain stark white layer with the balloons cut out. Now I'm going to apply that third layer of dimension with these stark white die cuts and kind of build up the scene a little bit, but I've got that third layer of dimension on this overly simple card, so it really adds in a whole lot of interest to this very simple card design. Now I did overlap a few of these balloons with other balloons that had already been colored in, just to give a feel of really a bunch of balloons floating around in a space. So I'm using one. So for the sentiment on this set, I pulled out one I hadn't used in a while, but it's one of my favorites. It's the Sentiment Sampler Stamp Set from Paper Smooches. I love it because of the font on this. It's perfect for your kids' cards. So I stamped Celebrate in the bottom right hand corner, and I just used a black ink so it was nice and bold. And now I'm just going to add different sized and different wavy lines to the bottom of these balloons. I'm using my micron pen here. You could use any black pen, or you could use different colors if you wanted to. Another fun idea would be to add some baker's twine or string on the bottom of these. Tie a little loop around it and glue down those strings or let them hang off. That would be fun too. But I just decided to go for very simple lines here, and I am adding a few loops here and there at the top to create little ties on the balloons as well. And finally, for a little bit more embellishment, something I just can't seem to get away from these days, I decided to add a few drops of enamel accents. These are the black tie enamel accents, and I went a little overboard, but I love these things. They add so much to a plain and simple card without adding a whole lot more dimension to it. So I put a few squirts of that around, and once that was finished, I called this card good. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to leave you with a close-up of the finished card as well as some pictures. On the left side of your screen, you'll see a few different links you can click on. The top will take you to a video you might enjoy watching next. The bottom left will take you to my blog, where you can find more information and the supply list for this card. And the bottom right will subscribe you to my channel if you aren't already. Thank you guys for watching today, and happy crafting!